Piers Plowman by William Langland. Passus 20.
Then as I walked on my way, when I'd awakened thus, heavy-hearted I went, and anguished in spirit. I didn't know where to eat, nor what place I might. And as noon drew near, need stood before me, and accosted me discourteously, and called me a fraud. Couldn't you excuse yourself, like the king and the others, and what you got on to go living on with, garments and sustenance, amounted to no more than spiritus temperantiae, recommended to you, and you nabbed nothing else but what need told you? And need has no law, and shall never fall in debt. For there are 3 things that he takes to save his life. That is food, when men refuse him it, and he finds no money in his purse. And none will stand surety for him, and he can supply no pledge. If in that case he cadges something, acquires it by sleight, surely he doesn't sin who so gets his food. And though he comes thus to some clothing, and can make no better bargain, need shall straightway serve as his bondsman. And if he'd like to lap water, nature's law decrees that he drink at every ditch before he dies of thirst. So needy in this great need may take what's necessary for him, without counsel of conscience or cardinal virtues, so long as he pursue and persevere spiritus temperantiae. For there's no virtue to be preferred to spiritus temperantiae, neither spiritus justitiae nor spiritus fortudinis. For spiritus fortitudinis offends very often. He'll do more than moderation, that asks many a time and oft, and beat his body over bitterly, and that body too little, and inflict greater grief on men when good faith wishes. And spiritus justitiae will judge willy-nilly, according to the king's counsel, if it's the commons' pleasure, and spiritus prudentiae will fail in many a particular of what he supposes would happen if it weren't for his wit. Such supposing is not wisdom, nor sage prognostication. Man proposes, and God disposes. God governs all good virtues, but need is next him, for he soon knows meekness, and is lowly as a lamb, for lack of what he needs. For need by necessity makes needy men feel humble. Philosophers forsook wealth, for they wished to be needy, and lived most wretched lives, and looked for no riches. And God's Spirit would forgo all his great joy, and he came and took mankind, and became needy. He was so needy, as the book says in many sundry places, that he spoke this speech in the sorrow on the cross. The fowl may fly, and the fox creep to a hole, and the fish swim with his fin to find his rest, while he gripes me so narrowly that I must needs remain, and suffer sorrow most sour that shall turn to joy. Therefore, don't be abashed to abide and to be needy, since he who was the world's creator was willfully needy, and never was there any so needy, and none died poorer. When need had scolded me, so I fell asleep at once, and dreamed most marvelously that in man's form Antichrist came, and cut truth's branches, quickly turned the tree upside down, and tore up the roots, and made false spring up, and spread the support men's needs. In every country where he came, he cut away truth, and got guile to grow there as if it were a god. Friars followed that fiend, for he gave them copes, and religious orders did him reverence and rang their bells, and all the convent came to welcome a usurper, and all his followers as well as him, save only fools, which fools would prefer far more to die than to live any longer, since loot was so despised. And a false fiend Antichrist put all folks beneath his rule, and mild men and holy, whom no misery frightened, defied all falseness and folk who practiced it. And what king gave comfort to the false, conscience of their guile? These others cursed, and his counselors, whether clerks or laymen. Antichrist thus soon had hundreds at his banner, and pride bore it presumptuously, displaying it about, with a lord who lived for delight of his body, and who came against conscience, the keeper and the guide of Christian kindred and of cardinal virtues. "I counsel," said conscience then, "come with me, you fools, into unity, holy church, and let's hold ourselves there, and let's cry out to kind that he come and defend us, fools, from these fiends' limbs for love of Piers the Plowman. And let's cry to all the commons to come into unity, and abide there and strike blows against Belial's children." Kind heard conscience then, and came out of the planets, and sent forth his foragers, fevers and fluxes, coughs and cardiac ailments, cramps and toothaches, rheums and running sores, and rankling scurvy, boils and blisters, and burning agues, frenzies and foul disorders. Foragers of kind had pricked and played upon people's skulls. A number large as a legion straightway lost their lives. There were howls of, "Help! Here comes kind with death that is dreadful to undo us all." The Lord who lived for delight then cried aloud for a knight called Comfort to come bear his banner. "Alarm! Alarm!" said that Lord. "Each man look out for himself." Then these men met, before minstrels could pipe, or heralds of arms had identified lords. Old Age the hoary, he was in the vanguard, and bore the banner before death. He claimed it by right. Kind came after with many cutting sores, such as poxes and pestilence, and brought many people to ruin. So Kind, with bodily corruptions, killed very many. Death came driving after him, and dashed all to dust, companies of kings and knights, kaisers and popes, learned or unlearned. He let no man stand that he hit squarely, whoever stirred afterward. Many a lovely lady and their lover knights sank down swooning for sorrow of death's blows. Then conscience of his courtesy craved of Kind to cease and abstain, and see whether they would leave pride privily and be proper Christians. And Kind ceased straightway to see the people amend. Then Fortune began to flatter those few that were alive, and promised them long life, and sent lechery out among all manner of men, married and unmarried, and gathered a great host all against conscience. This lechery laid on with a laughing face, and with privy speech and painted words, and armed himself in idleness and in arrogant bearing. He bore a bow in his hand, with many broad arrows, which were feathered with fair promise, and many a false betrothal. With unseemly stories he distressed very often conscience and his company, Holy Kirk's teachers. Then covetousness came and considered how he might overcome conscience and the cardinal virtues, and armed himself in avarice, and lived hungrily. His weapon was all wiles, to win money and hide it. With glozings and garblings he beguiled the people. Simony pursued him to assail conscience, and put pressure on the Pope, and they appointed prelates as allies of Antichrist, to hold safe their temporalities. And he came to king's council like a keen baron, and cuffed conscience in court before them all, and made good faith flee, and false to abide, and boldly bore down with many a bright coin much of the wit and the wisdom of Westminster Hall. He jogged to a justice, and jousted in his ear, and overturned all his integrity with, "Take this, and think better of me." And for the arches in haste he headed afterward, and turned civil into simony, and then subverted the official. For a miniver mantle he made true matrimony divide before death came, and fashioned divorces. "Alas," said conscience, and cried, "would Christ of his grace that covetousness were a Christian, since he's so keen a fighter, and stout-hearted and steadfast, while his purse strings hold." And then life laughed, and let his clothing be slashed, and in haste armed himself in whoreson's words, and judged holiness a joke and gentleness a waster, and alleged that lute was a churl and lyre a gentleman. Conscience and his counsel he accounted them folly. Thus for a little luck life revived, and pricked forth with pride, he praises no virtue, and cares not how kind slew folk, and shall come to the last, and kill all earthly creatures, save conscience alone. Life leapt aside, and selected a mistress. "Health and eye," said he, "and highness of heart shall induce you to have no dread of either death or age, and so forget sorrow, and have no sense of sin." Life liked this, and his love fortune, and at last they begot in their gloating a graceless brat, one who caused much care, and was called Sloth. Sloth matured with wondrous speed, and was soon of age, and wedded one Wanhope, a wench of the brothel. Her sire was an assizer, who never swore truthfully, one Tom Two-Tongue, convicted at every inquest. This Sloth grew skilled in war, and made himself a sling, and drew dread of despair 12 miles about. Then Conscience in his care called upon Old Age, and said he should strive to fight and scare away Wanhope. And Old Age took Good Hope, and hastily he stationed him, and drove Wanhope away. And he fights with Life, and Life fled for fear to Physic for help, and besought succor from him, and had some of his salve, and gave him gold aplenty, which gladdened his heart. And they gave him a gift in return, a glass helmet. Life believed that medicine would delay old age, and drive away death with drugs and prescriptions. And Old Age ventured against Life, and he hit at the last a physician in a furred hood, so that he fell in a palsy, and there that doctor died before 3 days passed. "Now I see," said Life, "that surgery and medicine cannot do any good against all old age." In hope for this health he grew heartily of heart, and so rode off to revel, a rich place and a merry one. The company of comfort men called it once. And Old Age came after him, and went over my head, and made me both bald in front and bare on the crown. So hard he went over my head, it will always be evident. "Mr. Bad-mannered Age," I said, "may mischief go with you. Since when was the highway over a men's heads?" "If you had any courtesy," I said, "you would have asked leave." "What? Leave, lazy loafer?" he said, and laid on me with age, and hit me under the ear. I can hardly hear. He buffeted me about the mouth, and beat out my molars, and fettered me with fits of gout. I'm not free to go far, and of the woe that I was in my wife had pity. and wished most warmly that I were in heaven. For the limb that she loved me for and liked to feel, notably at night when we were all naked in bed, I might by no means make it do her will. So old age with her aid had beaten it down. And as I sat in this sorrow, I saw kind passing by, and death drew near me. Dread made me quake, and I cried to kind, "Can you bring me out of care? Lo, old age, the hoary, has attended to me. Avenge me if you see fit, for I would fain be hence." If vengeance is what you want, wend your way into unity, and hold yourself there till I send for you, and see you learn a craft to carry on before you come thence. "Counsel me, kind," said I, "what craft is best to learn?" "Learn to love," said Kind, "and leave all other crafts." "How can I get my keep thus, and clothe and feed myself?" "If you love folk faithfully, you shall find you never lack worldly food or clothes to wear while your life lasts." And by counsel of Kind I commenced to roam through contrition and confession until I came to unity, and there conscience was constable to save Christian people, and was strongly besieged by 7 great giants that held with Antichrist hard against conscience. Sloth with his sling made a savage assault. Proud priests came with him, a pack bigger than 100. In paltocks and peaked shoes, pursed and long knives, came against conscience. They held with covetousness. "By the Mary," cried a cursed priest from a far corner of Ireland, "I make no more of conscience while I amass silver than I do of drinking a draught of good ale." And so said 60 of the same country, and shot shots in attack, many a sheaf of oaths and broad-hooked arrows, God's heart and his nails, and almost had unity and holiness down. Conscience cried, "Help, clergy, or I'll fall because of imperfect priests and prelates of Holy Church." Friars heard him cry out and came to help him, but because they did not know their craft well, conscience rejected them. Then need drew near and announced to conscience that they came for covetousness, to have cure of souls. "And since they are poor, perhaps, having no patrimony, to fare well they will flatter folk that are rich, and, since they elected to live a life of cold and hardship, let them chew as they choose, uncharged with the cure of souls. For he who must beg his livelihood lies more often than he who labors for his livelihood, and lets beggars share it. And forasmuch as they forsook the felicity of earth, let them be like beggars, and live by angels' food." At this counsel, conscience then commenced to laugh, and comforted them courteously, and called in all friars, and said, "Sirs, you are surely welcome to unity and holy church. But one thing I pray you, hold yourselves in unity, and have no envy of learned or unlearned, but live by your rule. And I will give you my guarantee. You shall get bread and clothing and other necessities enough. You'll not lack anything if you leave off studying logic and learn to love. For love they left their lordship, both land and school, Friar Francis and Dominic, for love of holiness. And if you covet cure of souls, Kind will tell you that in moderation God made all manner of things, and established them in a certain and settled number, and named them names, and numbered the stars. Who numbereth the multitude of the stars, and calleth their names to them all? Kings who protect the kingdom with their company of knights have officers under them, each a settled number. And if they pay men to make war, they mark them down in a roster. No paymaster will pay them wages, though they fight like proper soldiers, unless their names are noted among the number of the hired. All others in battle are held to be thieves, pillagers, and plunderers, in every parish cursed. Monastic men and women, all members of religious orders, each order has its rule and asks a settled number of letters and unlettered. The law desires and demands a certain number for a certain sort, save only with friars. Therefore, said Conscience, by Christ, kind wit tells me it is wicked to pay your wages. You're waxing out of number. Heaven has even number, and hell is without number. Therefore, I would strongly wish that you were in the register, and your number under a notary's seal, and neither more nor less. Envy heard this and ordered friars to go to school and learn logic and law, and also contemplation, and preach to men about Plato, and support it by Seneca, that all things under heaven ought to be held in common. I believe that he lies, who so preaches to unlearned men, for God made a law for men, and Moses taught it, Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. But this is poorly preserved in parishes of England, for parsons and parish priests who are supposed to shrive the people are called curates because they should know and cure them, assign penance to all people who are their parishioners, and make them ashamed in their shrift. But shame makes them go off and flee to the friars, as false folk go to Westminster, who borrow money and bear it there, and bid importunately their friends to forgive the debt, or grant a further term. But while he is in Westminster, he will keep busy, and make himself merry with other men's goods. And so it fares with many folk who confess themselves to friars, such as assizers and executors. They will assign the friars a portion of the estate to pray for them, and play with the remainder, and leave the dead man in debt until the day of doom. Envy hereupon hated Conscience, and gave fellowships to friars to study philosophy in school, while covetousness and unkindness came to attack Conscience. In unity, Holy Church, Conscience held himself, and appointed Peace porter to bar the gates, and all tale-tellers and tattlers of gossip. With their help, Hypocrisy made a hard assault. Hypocrisy at the gate began a grim fight, and wounded most maliciously many a wise teacher who'd been in accord with Conscience and cardinal virtues. Conscience called a doctor who could give good shrift. Go, give salve to those that are sick, whom sin has wounded. Shrift composed a sharp salve, and made men do penance for the dubious deeds that they had done before, and that Piers's pardon might be paid, rede quod debes. Some did not like this surgeon, and they sent letters to see if there were a doctor in the siege that applied softer compresses. Sir loved to live in lechery, lay there and groaned. From fasting on Friday he fared as he would die. There is a surgeon in the siege who has soft touch, and knows far more about physic, and fashions gentler remedies. One Friar Flatterer is both physician and surgeon. Said Contrition to Conscience, have him come to unity, for we have here many a man hurt by hypocrisy. We have no need, said Conscience. I know no better doctor than parson or parish priest, penitencer or bishop, except for Piers the Plowman, who has power over all and may deal out indulgences unless debt prevents it. I may well consent, said Conscience, because you desire it, that friar flatterer be fetched and give physic to you sick. The friar heard hereof and hurried fast to a lord for a letter to allow him leave to have a cure like a curate. And he came with his letter boldly to the bishop, and went back to his authority to hear confession in any countries that he came to. And he came to where Conscience was, and clapped at the gate. Peace, porter of unity, prepared to open up, and asked in haste what he wanted there. In faith, said the friar, for profit and health I would converse with contrition, and therefore I came here. He is sick, said Peace, and so are many others. Hypocrisy has hurt them. They'll not easily recover. I am a surgeon, said the friar, and skilled at mixing salves. Conscience is well acquainted with me, and knows how competent I am. I pray you, said Peace then, before you proceed further, what are you called? I request you not conceal your name. Certainly, said this fellow, Sir Penetrans Domos. Yes? Well, you can go away then, said Peace. By God, for all your medicine, unless you're competent in some craft, you're not coming in here. I knew such a one once, not 8 winters ago, who came in thus coped to a court where I lived, and served as surgeon for both our sire and our dame. And at the last this limiter, when my lord was out, he salved our women, so till some were with child. Courteous speech called on Peace to cast open the gates. Let the friar and his fellow come in, and give them fair welcome. He may see and hear here. It may happen so that life through his lore will leave covetousness, and be in dread of death, and withdraw from pride, and become accorded with conscience, so that they'll kiss each other. Thus, because of courteous speech, the friar was called in, and came to Conscience, who courteously greeted him. You are welcome, said Conscience. Can you heal the sick? Here is Contrition, said Conscience. My cousin, wounded. Comfort him, said Conscience, and take care of his injuries. The compresses of the parson and his powders bite too sorely, and he lets them lie too long, and is reluctant to change them. From Lenten to Lenten he lets his remedies bite. That's too long, I believe, said this limiter. I'll amend it. And he sets out to search Contrition's wounds, and prescribes a remedy of a privy payment, and I shall pray for you, and for all that you're beholden to all my lifetime, and make a memoria for you at Mass and at Matins, as friars of our fraternity, for a little silver. Thus he goes about gathering cash and glozing those he shrives, until Contrition had clean forgotten to cry and to weep, and wake for his wicked works as he was wont to do. Because of the comfort his confessor gave, he abandoned contrition, which is the sovereign salve for sins of every kind. Sloth saw that, and so did pride, and came to attack Conscience with a keen will. Conscience cried again to clergy to help, and bade Contrition come to keep the gate. He lies drowned in a dream, said Peace, and so do many others. The friar with his physic has enchanted the folk here, and given them a drug to drink. They dread no sin. By Christ, said Conscience then, I will become a pilgrim and walk as wide as the world reaches to seek Piers the Plowman, who might expunge pride, and see that friars had funds who flatter for need and contradict me, Conscience. Now, kind avenge me, and send me heart and health till I have Piers the Plowman. And Conscience cried for grace until I became wakeful. End of Piers Plowman by William Langland.